Hi, I'm Liz Hesketh from British Horse Feeds, the makers of Speedi-Beet. At British Horse Feeds, we take feeding horses very seriously. And today we're at the fantastic Eland Lodge Equestrian Centre, where John Coupland and Katie Ferrari have kindly agreed that we can use their facilities to demonstrate to you how important it is to feed fibre to your horse and how Speedi-Beet can be successfully incorporated into a horse feeding regime.
I'm Clare MacLeod and I'm an independent registered equine nutritionist. Being independent means I'm not attached to any particular feed company and therefore my advice and information is impartial. My qualifications are in animal science, majoring in equine, undergraduate level, and a master's degree in human and equine sports science. I've been a practicing nutritionist now for about 15 years. I'm registered with the British-based Association for Nutrition, who are an organisation who recognise only the highest standards in nutrition practice. In order to become registered, you have to demonstrate a high level of knowledge, education and experience. In this way, the Association for Nutrition ensure the public are protected from poor advice. The next time you reach for the sugar when you're going to sweeten your tea or coffee, consider where that sugar has come from. Most of our sugar in the UK comes from sugar beet, which is a crop grown throughout the UK for its sugar content. The benefits of this crop, apart from the sugar, is that it produces a really nice high fibre feed for horses. The sugar beet itself looks like a turnip, and it's the root part that is rich in both sugar and fibre. After sugar extraction, the dried pulp can either have molasses added in or actually just be fed unmolassed. This dried pulp is usually soaked before feeding to horses, and after soaking, the unmolassed sugar beet pulp is a very useful fibre and mineral-rich, low-sugar horse feed.
So this is Speedi-Beet. Speedi-Beet is produced by British Horse Feeds at our mill in Massam in the heart of the Yorkshire Dales. So why is Speedi-Beet so special? Well, we take unmolassed sugar beet pulp from a quality source and we subject it to a unique patented cooking process. And this process disrupts the fibres in the sugar beet pulp, allowing the fibre and locked-in nutrients to become more available for digestion by the horse. The process not only does this, it also helps the speed at which Speedi-Beet will soak, and Speedi-Beet will soak in just 10 minutes in cold water, and after that 10 minutes it's ready for use and ready for feeding to your horse. A lot of people don't know that Speedi-Beet actually has only 5% sugar in it, so it's 95% sugar free and no starch. So it's a fantastic feed for laminitic horses and is in fact approved by the Laminitis Trust. But Speedi-Beet is a very versatile feed. It's not just suitable for laminitics. It can be used to feed any horse and it's fantastic even if you've got a competition horse or a performance animal. So Claire, can you explain why it's important that horses are fed a high fibre diet?
Horses have evolved over many, many years as browsers of high fibre plant material, eaten in very large quantities. They're fibre specialists. Their digestive anatomy and physiology reflects the diet they were meant to eat. They have a dietary requirement for fibre. If you try to fulfil their dietary requirements like protein, energy, vitamins and minerals without considering fibre, you will cause health problems. An example of this would be a performance horse fed a high starchy cereal grain-based diet with restricted fibre-rich forage. This horse will be at an increased risk of colic, gastric ulcers, increased risk of abnormal behaviour and will not be optimally healthy.
What about the horse's digestive tract? How does it cope with all this fibre?
Well, the horse's digestive tract is specifically engineered really through evolution to deal with a high fibre diet. They have constantly erupting teeth to deal with the fibrous material they eat. They have a relatively small stomach which produces acid continuously. They have a fast passage rate through their small intestine and a very large hindgut, which is full of microorganisms that break down the fibre in their diet, releasing nutrients they can absorb. So their gut shows us that they are really best suited to having a high fibre diet.
You've said that the horse has evolved to eat a high fibre diet, and presumably by that you mean moist, fresh plant material. So what about the typical stabled horse that eats largely a dry diet?
Yes, Liz, that's a good point. The natural diet of the horse that I've been talking about, which is high in fibre, would include grass, sedges, hedges, tree leaves, that sort of material, which is high in water. In the winter months in the UK, when grass supply is a bit short, we often house horses and feed them a much drier diet, something like a hay and a concentrate compound feed. The natural plant-based diet of the horses would be around 80% water, which means that for every kilo of material the horse eats, it'll be taking in about 800 millilitres of water. With a typical stabled horse on a hay and hard feed diet, that will be about 15% moisture. So for every kilo the horse eats, it'll be taking in just 150 millilitres of water. So obviously this is a much drier diet. So feeding succulents and water-containing feeds over winter to a stabled horse in a dry diet is really good practice.
Speedi-Beet is so easy to prepare. You just take 1 part Speedi-Beet and you add 5 parts water by weight. So for example, what that means is if you had 1 kilogram of Speedi-Beet, you would add 5 kilograms of water, which is 5 litres. Now it's always a good idea to weigh your Speedi-Beet at least the first time. Scoops are all different sizes and shapes. So I've actually weighed this scoop of Speedi-Beet, and my scoop actually holds a kilo. So if we take that kilo of Speedi-Beet, and I've got 5 litres of water here, add 5 litres of water, leave for 10 minutes, and that's your Speedi-Beet ready. So this is Speedi-Beet, and that's been soaked for 10 minutes.
What many horse owners don't realise is that unmolashed sugar beet pulp, for example Speedi-Beet, is a very useful and very versatile horse feed. In fact, it can be used for any horse or pony, but the key is the amount that you feed per day. So for example, for a laminitic or a horse that needs to lose weight or one that doesn't require any extra hard feed, the maximum you want to feed is about a mugful, and this would be for a 500 kilo 15-2 hand-high typical horse. If we weigh this mugful, we can see it's about 120 grams. And as a rough guide, that would soak up to almost this scoopful soaked sugar beet ready to feed. On the other hand, if you're feeding a working horse or one that needs to gain condition, to get the benefits from this feed stuff, you need to feed a lot more than that. You need to be feeding for the 500 kilo typical 15-2 hand horse around at least a kilo a day, which would be this scoopful, and that would soak up to around this amount here. You can actually feed more than that, and the manufacturers of Speedi-Beet recommend that you can feed up to 2.5 kilos per day to a 500 kilo horse. So that would be 2.5 scoops of dry Speedi-Beet before it's soaked. This is Besby, and Besby is a 16-2 warm blood cross thoroughbred. He's and his owner Katie is eventing at B100 level, and Besby's currently in light to moderate work. He's in great condition, just right for his level of work and his level of competition. For a horse like him to have the full benefit of a feed like unmolashed sugar beet pulp, he'd want to be fed at least a kilo of dry weight unmolashed sugar beet pulp before soaking. This is Mercedes, and Mercedes is a 29-year-old Cleveland Bay Cross thoroughbred mare. Mercedes has Cushing syndrome, and she's also prone to laminitis, so a horse like this can be quite challenging to feed. An unmolashed sugar beet product such as Speedi-Beet can be really useful for horses like this because it supplies them with a substantial amount of calories and fibre, but a very low sugar intake. And you need to feed good quantities of unmolashed sugar beet to a horse like Mercedes. At her age, her teeth function will be declining, So she will gradually eat less and less hay, and she will need a high fibre diet to replace that hay intake. So as I say, unmolasses sugar beet is just a very useful feed for a horse like this. This is Rupert, and Rupert's an 18-year-old Irish cob who's in light work. Rupert has successfully lost some body weight, he's been on a diet. And unmolasses sugar beet pulp, for example Speedi-Beet, can be very useful for a horse like Rupert, just to give something palatable to mix supplements into. So you'd feed a very small amount and then mix your vitamin and mineral supplements or any other supplements that they might require into it. A horse like Rupert wouldn't need the full recommended amount of a regular compound feed, but he does need something to balance his forage. So a small amount of unmolasses sugar beet can be a really useful feed to mix your supplements into.